Joining us on The Informer, Sam Spurnett, who's a director at Rodney Samuels Consulting. But more importantly, you're a buyer's advocate.
Yes.
You've been in the game, the real estate game, for a lifetime.
Feels
and
like it.
well, not only that, the reason why I want to start here is because I want you to take us back to the glory days when you first started, and how much the business, how much the classifieds, and how much all those newspapers and magazines, what they meant for the real estate industry.
Well, I mean, yeah, going back all those years, I remember sitting in my boss's office on a Wednesday afternoon discussing the line ads that we had to get ready for the age. And you've only got 38 words, you can't go beyond your limit, and
a deadline.
And a deadline of getting in on Thursday, which usually meant I had to jump in my car on a Friday and hand deliver things because you couldn't fax them in that late. And it really did revolutionise. And I mean, one thing that you don't do now in real estate that we used to do was Saturday morning before the opens, which listings had you missed? And that was the worst
feeling.
You're petrified because they went through every line ad. Who got called into that?
The closest I would run to that, and Rob and everyone else in the media understands this, it's the media watch. The one thing you don't want to be is on media watch on Monday because you've done something spectacularly wrong or something truly outrageous that was worth a mention. Yeah.
Sometimes the outrageous is good though.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sometimes test it, push the waters. But we don't live in outrageous times now.
No.
We're living in unprecedented times, in uncharted waters. And real estate has been compromised in, like so many other businesses, and again, it's all been artificial. It's not as if we talk about clearance rates, there should be no talk of clearance rates at the moment, because you can't possibly compare with pre-COVID to COVID.
Well, that's it. I think you've got to be careful how you interpret the data and also what the data is going to mean. You're right, clearance rates at the moment are probably something you shouldn't really focus on because of the lack of auctions and
the opportunity.
Exactly, and a lot of things are being sold privately and prior because we're doing online auctions now, but that's only been in effect since Sunday. Prior to that, we couldn't really do much for 6 weeks. So you've just got to take everything with a bit of grain of salt, and as I've said to a lot of my clients at the moment, just be patient and be cautious. Now is the time to be cautious.
Now, I mentioned the clearance rates, and we talked about it just before we started the interview, that I saw some clearance rates coming out of the ACT, out of Canberra, that were phenomenal. They're up there. And you remarked, you said the reason why they're so strong is because?
Well, Canberra's a selective market because they're all government employees, so guess who hasn't lost their jobs during this time?
Guaranteed.
They've got guaranteed work, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's not a slander, it's just you've got to take that market as what it is. And in the same breath, I saw a lot of journalists reporting that the low clearance rates in Melbourne were a sign that the Melbourne property market's not doing well. And I'm thinking to myself, we can't even do an auction. How can we have a clearance rate?
You mentioned, again, just a moment ago, before we started, that since the announcement by the government that inspections were going to be allowed again after weeks of lockdown, your phone hasn't stopped ringing.
Well, everyone's come out of the woodwork now, both vendors and buyers wanting to do something. And it's not because there's pressure on them to do something as in financial. It's because they've had 6 weeks, and some people longer, at home going, do I really like my house? What would I change about my house? Is this actually where I want to live?
Have you been talking to my wife?
Possibly. She may have called me. But what is interesting is a lot of it is born of the fact of we can't go away and we don't see a light as to when we can go back to Europe or Asia. So they're going, well, that's $20, $30 or even $10,000 a year I'm not spending on an overseas holiday. Can I put that into my home to make it more comfortable? Or do we just sell up and buy the home we love?
Is that why we're seeing so much nesting going on?
Yes.
Yeah? And why the Harvey Normans of the world are saying, you beauty, long may lockdowns continue.
Well, look, I've got a few mates in the trades and they're doing kitchen getting inquiry about kitchen renovations, bathroom renovations, because people having now been stuck at home and actually using their kitchen and not going out for dinner as often, go, it's not very functional. I need to improve this. And if I'm going to be here more and I'm working from home, maybe this house isn't big enough. Or I've got a client at the moment, lovely young couple with a child. They've run out of space because they're both working from home now. That's something they never predicted.
We're talking to a buyer advocate. His name is Sam Spurnett. And Sam, I bet now people are going to be talking to you about what they want. And one of those things that we never thought about before was space at home. Extra space at home, an extra living spot, an extra office contingency just to do Zoom.
Oh, exactly.
It doesn't have a wall that looks kind of different.
Well, I mean, you'd remember the big push back towards probably the late 90s into the 2000s of open plan living.
Ah, yes.
Everything was one big open space. And look, that's great for entertaining. But if you need somewhere to hide from your kids or your partner, not so handy. And that's where we're seeing actually a bit of a return in design, I think. We'll now go towards the more traditional where you might have a formal living and dining area or even a bigger home office, not just a study nook, as they call it.
Yeah.
Which I call a broom closet.
So what advice do you have going forward as we start moving? And sorry, let's start thinking again, change our thinking. We need to live with COVID until there's a vaccine
100%.
or it goes away. We can't imagine that when the button is flicked over, that everything will return to as it was. I think life as it was has finished for us. I'm not saying it's the end of life, it's a new life. It's a different perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it really is. And I think as we learn to live with the different normal, as I hate that saying, but it is the truth. It's going to be a different level of normal. We need to look at how we want to live moving forward, how we're going to live, but also, is that for us, is it that I need to be in the inner suburbs now that I'm no longer going to my office in the city? Maybe I'll move to an outer suburb and have lifestyle, have a bigger block of land, the kids can run around. Or is it I don't even want to be in this area anymore, I'm going somewhere completely different.
That's a very good point that you make, because I know from experience that the young students, the cashed up students from Asia who would arrive, the criteria was it needed to be near a rail line, needed to be close to the inner city, needed to be close to the campuses, needed to be close to the schools, tick, 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 shopping, all that, whatever. What are the, as a buyer advocate, what are the sorts of things that now we need to look to make sure is the proven power point that we have to cross off?
Well, I think it depends. If you're looking at from a home buying point of view and not investment, we'll deal with home buyers first. What you've got to look at is, does it actually suit what your lifestyle is? And have you decided now you're going to entertain more at home, which I think we all will. We'll go back to the 1980s dinner parties that I know my parents were a big fan of.
But 15 only, not
depending on what Dan lets us have. We've got to wait for Dan's rulings. And from there, I think people will start to choose differently. I know what I'm doing personally. I'm currently looking at some plans and permits ideas for my own property, just to turn it around a little bit.
Any builders out there, potential builders, quality builders, see Sam right after this interview.
I'm not going to hear the end of this. But I think most importantly, like when you talked about that, young professional wanting to be near the shops, the transport, the city, I think they're going to start going, well, hang on, have I had enough space in that property? When you're only there sort of to sleep and eat,
it's okay.
You can live in a smaller space. But when you're working from home, you've got your partner there, or even if you're by yourself, you might feel like you're on top of yourself a little bit and need a little bit more space. So I think, and we're seeing it already in the rental side, where the inner city is struggling a bit with the rentals because of the oversupply of apartments. Whereas when you come into the outer suburbs, we're seeing very strong demand for rental properties.
Room suddenly has taken on a different dimension.
No longer an apartment, but maybe a two-bedroom villa unit.
What about the Docklands, which has taken an eternity to get up and running? It always had some problems. I remember in the early days, Vic Urban had asked me to join them as a bit of a supporter and a consultant. And I remember saying to them, you've got to give people a way to get in, multiple ways to get in, and multiple ways to get out. And then you've got to provide infrastructure.
Docklands could have been one of the greatest areas of Melbourne, being in the doorstep of the city. They could have done it so much better. I'm not a big fan of Docklands. Anyone that's watched any of my videos or have met me know that I just don't touch it. And a lot of that comes down to the oversupply. They've built too much too quickly. They've applied the great theory
without the add-ons.
There was no schools. There was no churches even.
Correct.
There was no
entertainment.
But I think if we're going down to the core of it, my biggest issue with planners these days is they think we're like Amsterdam. We're not. No one rides a bike everywhere in Melbourne. We're like LA. Everyone wants their car out the front. They want to be able to park like a rock star and rock up and be there. They don't want to have to walk in the rain because it's Melbourne.
Sam, I think we've got so much more we need to talk about. But will you promise to come back and we do some more of this? Because the times are changing, the mood is changing, the market is changing tremendously. Is there one bit of advice you'd like to leave us with? And if anyone wants to reach out and catch up with Sam Spinat, how do you do it?
Look, they can contact us via Facebook or Instagram, Rodney Samuels Consulting. We're on both LinkedIn as well under Sam Spinat or Rodney Samuels Consulting. Right. Always happy to have a chat. The initial consultations are great.
And the last word?
Be cautious. Don't panic buy. At a time like this, an opportunity may be an opportunity for the wrong reasons. So just take a deep breath before you jump in. And if you do need advice, reach out for it.